Right, Eric Donovan, thanks a million for joining us. Look, this is an exciting week. Anytime an Irish guy is fighting for a world title, it's always going to, capture the attention. I do think that Jason Quigley does hold a special place, I guess, in Irish sport and Irish fight fans. He's just we have him on here all the time, obviously, as people will know, but like, he's just such an infectious guy and somebody that people really like so much that, regardless of the ins and outs of what we'll talk about in the fight and stuff like that, this is just a guy that the whole country will get behind and will want to do the business on Friday night.
Most definitely. Jason Quigley, he exudes positivity and energy and charisma. And, he's just one of those good guys that everybody's rooting for. And I really hope he can do it. He's up against it. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But look, I mean, world titles are not won easy anyway. If you want to call yourself a world champion or have the luxury of calling yourself a world champion, you're going to have to go to a very deep, dark place to go and get it. And I know Jason he's well capable of doing that. So I just hope now that in the early hours of Saturday morning that he can deliver and put in a great performance.
We'll talk about Andrade in a minute. And he's 30-0 and he's world champion, and he's arguably the guy that Golovkin and Canelo and all these are avoiding, and maybe he could be as good as there is out there. But from Quigley's point of view, he had obviously that wobble a couple of years ago, and he hasn't fought too much since. He's had 3 fights. He looked good in the Mosley fight. The change up in coaching, he's obviously moved to Andy Lee. And he's had various other kind of like changes in his life and his outlook on himself as a professional fighter in the last couple of years that he sees as a positive view. How much of a difference can all of that stuff make? And do you see it in him? Obviously, he had a very good fight against Mosley, but it was one I guess we would have expected him to win. Have you seen that kind of new level in him in the last couple of fights?
Well, first of all, I think, it makes a big difference. Coaching, and that makes a big difference. And I know Jason has gone through a couple of changes and he needed them. I didn't think that the link up with Dominic Ingle was a good partnership at all. And that's where he suffered his first defeat to Terreno Johnson, and that was a difficult defeat for him as a stoppage defeat. He had to pick himself up after that, and he linked up with Andy Lee, which is, we all know Andy is a fantastic has a fantastic boxing brain, very intelligent guy. He's also worn the t-shirt. He's been there. He's been a world champion. But I just think probably in the early part of Jason's career, spent time out in LA. They gave him a nickname, El Animal. He was dominating a few of his early fights, knocking lads out. And sometimes you can, that can all kind of play a part. And you think that, okay, maybe I have to start fighting this style, this El Animal style, give these people what they want. And, because he was knocking guys out. But for most top fighters, in the first kind of 10 fights of their professional career anyway, they should be knocking guys out. They should be getting rid of them with relative ease. But then the benchmark and the bar is going to be raised, and the opposition are going to come very, very strong and tough and ready after that. And I just felt that maybe Jason neglected a bit of his boxing skills, especially in that fight with Terreno Johnson. He went away from what actually made him great in the first place, which is his boxing skills, his boxing IQ, his intelligence. And I think I can see that coming back now with the help of Andy Lee. He had a good fight, a good win against Mosley Jr., but it wasn't all plain sailing for him. We expected him to win the fight, but he actually had to pull it out of fire at one stage. The fight was slipping away from him at one, he was down on the cards, and then he turned it around the midway point, and he turned it around by getting back to what he does best, and that's boxing. And I think he's going to need that boxing skills, that boxing IQ against Andrade, especially in the first half of the fight, because Andrade is a dangerous, dangerous guy. And especially in the early rounds, he's explosive, he's powerful, and he's so fast. And but if Jason can kind of navigate his way through the earlier rounds and be within touch and distance, don't go all out, be smart, be clever. Remember, it's a marathon, not a sprint, and be in touch and distance in around the halfway point. Then I think he's in with a great chance, because Andrade tends to start fast, finish slow. You know, that has been the kind of the pattern over his last number of fights. If he doesn't get you out there early, he kind of, I wouldn't say goes through the motions, but he kind of plateaus a bit. You know what I mean? And so I think if Jason can kind of be in touching distance within around the midways of the fight, then he, you know, have a go then. You know, but be careful.
Yeah. So how good is Boo Boo Andrade, the fantastically named American World Champion? He's 30-0. He's 33 years of age, which is probably, you know, close enough to prime level when it comes to, you know, a fighter. And he is, I don't know if he's world famous, you know what I mean, for a world champion or whatever. He's not on the level of like the Golovkins or the Canelos or anything like that, but he does feel like this dangerous, like scary fighter. I just wondered what we should expect from him. Is he that he went to Matchroom and, you know, there's discussion of whether he's getting good enough fights, and even some people outside of Ireland are looking at this as, and you know, possibly not the level of fight that he needs. We hope that obviously Jason proves all of that wrong, but you know, is this somebody who should be a bigger name almost outside of boxing than he is?
Yeah, and he certainly thinks so as well. But like, make no mistake about it, the people in the boxing know how good he is. He's a world-class athlete. He's an elite level athlete, and he's been world class for a very long time. He boxed in the same world championships as me in 2007 in Chicago as an amateur. He won those world championships, and he went on to the Olympic Games, and he was tipped to win the gold medal in the Olympic Games as well. And he was beaten in the quarterfinals in a controversial controversial result in the quarterfinals. So he never actually got a medal there. But then obviously turning pro in 2000, and I think he turned pro in late 2008, and he won a world title then 5 years later. And he's been world champion ever since in the light middleweight division, and then over the last number of years in the middleweight division. Yes, he's right, and he's right in what he's saying, that there is a lot of top guys not, we could say avoiding him or whatever, but they're just not selecting him anyway. They're not selecting him because he is a tricky kind of a customer, and I can see why the top fighters wouldn't want to fight him, because he's that kind of awkward, slippery, kind of a nightmare style to be in against, you know, almost too good for his own self, that people don't want to give him that opportunity. But I think the link up now with Eddie Hearn, and then Eddie Hearn's connections to Canelo, even though Canelo's going away from him in the weight categories now, but I think there would be more of a realistic chance of maybe getting the Golovkin or the Arislandi Lara or Murata or one these other world champions in his division to maybe unify. That's where he would be thinking. But I get the impression every time I listen to him that he's almost bored of defending the title. He's bored of the people that he's fighting against, and hopefully he's bored of defending his title on Saturday night or Friday night, and Jason Quigley can capitalize on that, because he does give you that impression that he's like, oh, these are just more mandatory challengers. I want the big fights. Hopefully he overlooks Jason, and Jason can kind of, you know, maybe jump in and capitalize on that.
It's what I was going to say, really, is like, you know, there is an element that like Jason's 7-1 to win the fight, and maybe that's fair, but there is like, there is a kind of an under the radar element to it. We all know what his raw talent is, and you've outlined it really well there as to what Jason can do better. And we know that when he's at it on his game, he is world class, but maybe the wider boxing world doesn't really know that. And maybe Boo Boo Andrade's, you know, camp don't know it as well. And, you know, that does put him in a very advantageous position if everything is going right and if he does perform at his absolute best tomorrow night.
Yeah, I mean, look, you can only really judge Jason on what he's done so far. You know, Jason was a world-class amateur, European champion, world medalist, first Irish amateur boxer to get to a world final, male. And I remember commentating on that final as well. And what a fantastic world championships he had. He boxed absolutely exceptional in the semi-final. I remember beating a good Russian, and he lost out narrowly then to the Kazakh in the final. But that performance that Jason gave against the Russian in the 2013 semi-final, I know that's a good long time away, but like if he can kind of produce something similar along those lines, I think that's the type of performance you need to kind of beat a guy like Andrade. You know, you got to kind of just navigate the earlier rounds, stick to your boxing, get Andrade coming forward, rather than going into him. Get him get Andrade coming forward, having to kind of take chances, take risks, go on the back foot, but keep a high defense. Be very, very careful. And like, as I said, navigate through the earlier rounds and then have a go. But judging Jason's past opponents, like Glenn Tapia, like Jason boxed him out a broken hand, came through that. So he shows that he has resilience and resolve there. I know Toreno Johnson stopped Jason, but like, he didn't drop him. He didn't knock him out. You know, it was eventually retired, but Jason took some big, big shots, which proves that he has a chin. He has a solid chin. You're going to need that at this level. But he hasn't really Jason hasn't really boxed anybody along the same kind of ilk or kind of, you know, similarities as Andrade, who's a very slick southpaw. So I would have liked if he could have boxed somebody somebody even close to that. So I'd say sparring partners would have been very important for this camp. You know, I know they have Paddy Donovan as well in the same camp. Now, he's a southpaw as well, but relatively still very young and inexperienced. No, I wouldn't say inexperienced, like he was a world-class amateur, but he would provide good sparring, you know. But I don't know what other sparring partners that Andy would have brought in for Jason's camp, but I think it would have been that's going to be, you know, I think that's going to be crucial when it comes to obviously the fight night, what kind of preparation he's had and what kind of sparring partners he's had. It's very hard to get an exact sparring partner who's going to replicate their a style like Andrade's, because he is that very elusive and explosive type of fighter.
Absolutely. There's another element here, like, and we're not giving up on an upset or anything like that, and we hope we'll win, but it is a kind of a different path, as you said. It's almost not through the contender path, as you're talking about, and maybe having that kind of warm-up fight for the world title fight. He's kind of been picked out as somebody who possibly could sell tickets in New England, and you know, and it can be a big kind of a big fight. He's known there, obviously, and there's the Irish connection and so on and so forth. So that's giving him the chance, and that's great. Like, but talking to Jason, like, when there was rumors of a Canelo fight a few months ago, and he was like raring to go, you know what I mean? So there's no fear there, and there is a positivity there. But losses and wins are very, very important in a boxing record. But if you are almost catapulted up to what's possibly a higher level than you've proven so far, and you have a world title fight, and you go out and you give a really good account of yourself for 12 rounds and lose a tight one or split decision or whatever it might be, there's a world where unusually a loss can still catapult and help his career here tomorrow night.
Yeah, absolutely. But it really depends on the nature of your performance, the nature of your defeat. Like, I know we're actually, like, hypothetically speaking here, and you know, we're saying what happens if Jason loses. Well, you know, the bookies and the pundits or the boxing, what would you say, fraternity, we have Jason as the underdog here. So on paper, he's, you know, Andrade is supposed to win. But it does depend on the nature and how he wins, you know, like if Jason can put up a good fight and a big performance and really push Andrade all the way, then of course his stock can rise up in defeat. But I know that Jason won't be thinking like that. He'd be just thinking of winning, and that's got to be his mindset, winning and only winning. Yeah. But then those things will be assessed afterwards. But I agree. You know, if Jason could go out there and give a good performance and win, then he's going to change his life forever. But if he goes out there and loses, then it depends on the nature of the defeat. He could really get another chance. He could get another chance if he does well, if he performs well. His stock can definitely rise up. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot to play for. Like, you know, this is a world title fight in the middleweight division, in the glamour division, where there's big stakes at play here. Like, you know, winning this fight will change Jason Quigley's life forever. Yeah. You know, he'll be financially set up and everything after this, because winning this belt, you know, whether it's going to be a rematch with Andrade, which I think would be more than likely, because he'll probably have a rematch clause in that contract, and then it would be, you'd probably double or triple your purse for the next fight, you know, and set yourself really up for for life. So like, you know, boxing is a tough game. I would never, ever begrudge anybody making anything out of it. And there's no one better or more deserving than Jason Quigley.
It's a WBO belt he's fighting for as well, which, you know, a bit of history in that WBO middleweight belt in Ireland. Steve Collins, Andy Lee, his coach, obviously, and hopefully Jason as well. Look, I'm wary of asking you for too specific a prediction, but you're kind of, my guess would be that you kind of would say on the balance of things, Andrade is rightly favored, but that Jason does have a real chance.
Oh no, he definitely has a real chance, you know, because like, you know, Jason's been in against top level fighters as well. Probably more top level as an amateur. He's been in with the best as an amateur, more so than his professional career. I just think that the level of opposition hasn't been anything quite like Andrade. The level of opposition that Jason has had in the professional career hasn't been anything like Andrade. But then there's also the flip side of that. Andrade hasn't been in against anything quite like Jason Quigley in his professional career. So, like, you know, I think Jason is going to prove a very difficult test for Andrade. But it's all about execution of the performance on the night. Anybody can be beaten on the day or on the night. And I know that Jason Quigley is going to be really confident, and I know he's prepared hard and trained hard, and he's saying all the right things. So I just hope he can pull it off. I really do hope he can pull it off. It's going to be very, very difficult, but if he can do it, it's going to be up there with one of the greatest Irish victories of all time.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it'll be, there'll be a lot more people talking about it next week than there was this week, if that's the case. But it's on DAZN. You can see it on Friday night. I think they're talking about ring walk time around 3 a.m. So it's going to be a late one, but it's in Manchester, New Hampshire. So people should check that out. Eric, before I let you go, any news yourself, or you had 2 good wins this year? Are you looking at maybe getting out again in the spring, or?
Yeah, well, my plan is to kind of, you know, go all out now in 2022 and hopefully fulfill one of my goals, which is to become a European champion. I know I was in touch and distance of becoming a European champion back in May last year before I fractured my ribs in training camp, and absolutely devastated. But look, that's life. You take the knocks, you move on, and hopefully I can work my way back into that position next year. So my manager, Mark Dunlop, he's working behind the scenes. He's always working away and trying to get me the big fights. But I'm hoping for some news over the next couple of weeks about the earlier part of next year.
Very good, very good. Well, we look forward to it, and we look forward to tomorrow night as well. Jason Quigley against Boo Boo Andrade. Thanks so much for joining us, Eric. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure.